Hello, fellow fantasy sports junkies. Welcome to MFSN's Waiver Wire Show. I'm here with Fantasy Pros expert Andrew Seifter, and as always, Ross the Boss.
Hey, everybody, I'm Ross the Boss, and I want to talk Waiver Wire football with you, cowboy.
So, Ross, I have to ask you about your shirt, and that's funny coming from a guy who's wearing a Body by Bacon shirt to ask someone else about their shirt.
The shirt, I actually went to Africa a couple years ago, and I got this in Kenya from a tribe. I forgot the name of the tribe. If you said it, I would know it. But
tribe called
it's actually like a tribal wear for a tribe in Kenya.
Nice.
And decided because technically, if you're watching this show right now, you made the playoffs, and you want to stack your team so you're ready for the playoffs. And we got the answers for the playoffs, and you're going to win the whole thing because you're watching us.
Yeah. Playoffs? Wait, no, that's a great point, Ross. The bulk of the people who are going to be watching this have made the playoffs because there's no reason to be looking at the waiver wire at this point if you're not alive in week 14.
Well, unless you just like to hate yourself. That's the other reason.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people like that. Okay,
a majority of the people that are watching us today have made the playoffs. They want to win the league. They want to hear what we have to say. We've been money all year. So
that's why they're in the playoffs.
I made the playoffs. I made the playoffs in both of my leagues, which that's
congratulations.
You know, you and I got to thank you two, maybe more than anybody. You guys helped. I truly feel like a fantasy football monster now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Let's go with QBs.
So let me pat myself on the back real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Pat yourself on the back.
4 weeks ago, I said, because of schedule, I said, I'd rather start Kirk Cousins than Lamar Jackson. Andrew laughed at me, and Dr. Dan Ratner laughed at me. This guy is getting 300 yards a game and 3 touchdowns a game the past 3 weeks. Who has the last laugh now? Ross the Boss. You know why? Because his schedule is a joke. They're throwing the ball like crazy. I keep riding that Kirk Cousins whip. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, well, I was laughing more. I laughed more at the Lamar side of it than the Cousins side of it, for the record. But his home road splits actually are extreme. If you've noticed, all of his good games have been at home, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, and Cousins is now, I think he's like 80% owned. So people have been
listening,
listening, and it's mostly, at least 40% of that is because of Ross the Boss. So my number one QB pickup this week is just because I feel like he has more upside than anyone else. He's the new guy on the scene. It's Jalen Hurts. I think that he's taken over at quarterback. I don't know how good he's going to do, but he ran for like 87 yards.
But would you dare play Jalen Hurts in a fantasy playoff game in his first career start? I would never dare do that.
Dr. Dan Ratner.
Not against New Orleans.
Dr. Dan, he was 5 for 12. It was garbage time. And Wentz is going to start next week. It's not going to be Hurts. It's going to be Wentz, right, Andrew?
No, I think it's going to be Hurts. We're filming on Monday night, and the last I heard was that Doug Peterson said he hadn't decided yet. And usually, when a coach says they haven't decided yet, that means the incumbent is losing their job. So I think Hurts is going to start, but I couldn't trust him. I mean, New Orleans' defense has been amazing for the last month and a half too. I wouldn't do it. And we're at the point of the season where you're not stashing guys for theoretical future upside. You know?
No hope. I mean, if you're picking up Hurts to start, you're not going to win your league anyway. So might as well just chalk it up.
So there's one guy. There's one guy he's not 50. He's a little over 50%, but not by much. And I think this guy could actually have a huge last month of the season. It's Matthew Stafford. The Lions finally pulled the plug and fired Matt Patricia, who was just a terrible coach and a very conservative coach. And Drew Bevel, who was the offensive coordinator, is now the interim head coach. And they dramatically changed the way they played in the last week. Stafford threw the ball deep down the field far more often than he had at any point earlier in the season, and they played at a much quicker pace. So those are all music to the ears of fantasy managers. And I think Kenny Golladay is going to be back soon. I really do. I think it's been a really long wait, but I think he's going to be back. And I just see that offense trending in a really positive direction. So he's a guy I stashed on one of my teams.
Let me ask you guys one question. And I'm going to ask this to Dan because he lives in the city of where the team is located. Mayfield, 4 touchdowns, looked unbelievable. I think the weather had a lot to do with it when he didn't play well. There was a lot of wind, a lot of rain, a lot of stuff going on. When the weather was nice, This guy he was unbelievable. He had the best first half of any Cleveland Brown in history, I believe. I mean, what do you do with Mayfield? Well, if you need a quarterback, let's say your quarterback is not that great. Let's say it's Lamar Jackson. Do you go after Mayfield? Do you start Mayfield if you can pick him up?
I think Mayfield is truly, he's the only Mayfield and Hurts are the only two quarterbacks that are of any interest to me at this point. If you look at the Yahoo, I mean, I didn't have Stafford because he's over 50%, so I didn't even consider him. But first of all, a lot of teams are owning two quarterbacks now. I don't know if it's because of super flex leagues or what, but as a result, there's very few quarterbacks available. There's almost no one. But Mayfield, he plays better in a couple different circumstances. When OBJ is out, he's more relaxed. When Nick Chubb is back, everybody's keying on the run, and he's got a lot more leeway. He also just played particularly well. He's going to have his good games. He's going to have his bad games. I was very pleased to see him have a really good game against the Titans. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is somebody I want to be starting. The rule is which quarterback to pick up that's under 50% owned that might be worth owning. A guy who runs the ball could be worth owning.
If he had a better matchup, the fact he's just never started
I don't like him for this matchup.
I just can't do it in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. If Stafford's not available and I have to pick somebody up, it's not a great week for it. But I'm going for the revenge game of Andy Dalton against the Bengals. It's not a primetime game, Ross, right? It's a 1 o'clock
Dalton's going to be
Eastern
great.
time
Dalton's
game.
going to have three touchdowns, 300. He's going to look fantastic against the Bengals.
Yeah,
and that's a great pickup.
And that's better than Mayfield against Baltimore.
Yeah, but how about Hurts to Ertz? That rhymes, right? Hurts to Ertz.
It rhymes, but it might not get you a lot of fantasy points.
Okay,
all
fine.
right, listen, guys, I think we should move on from quarterbacks because there's just
I
nobody.
agree. 1,000%.
All right, so let's move to running backs. Who do you guys have at your number one spot that you would want to pick up?
Well, another guy that's just barely over 50%, just to bring up real quick, that people should grab if they're available, is Cam Akers, who we've talked about before. He just had his second big game in a row. One issue to keep in mind there, though, is Daryl Henderson did miss a big chunk of the first half with a knee injury. So I'm still not 100% convinced that we've had a shift away from the committee mentality there. But clearly Akers has tons of upside, and he's the best running back to start in that backfield right now. As far as guys under 50%, I'm looking at Ty Johnson with the Jets. Frank Gore suffered a concussion. The Jets are never doing the logical thing, but I mean, why wouldn't you just play a younger guy? If Gore comes back, he still shouldn't be getting 20 carries a game. So let Ty Johnson go. He could be an every down back if Gore's out and have some sneaky value. So he'd be my top choice. And another on the opposite end of the spectrum, the ageless wonder, Adrian Peterson. I'm really worried about DeAndre Swift. It's scary when they call a concussion a brain injury. I mean, all concussions are brain injuries, but this one sounds particularly troublesome, and he's still having some lingering effects from that. They said he had an illness this last week. It wasn't clear if that was related to the concussion, but I don't know if he's going to be back at all this season. And if he's not, Adrian Peterson has 2 touchdowns in 2 games in a row. So he's an interesting option now.
I agree. I mean, again, Andrew and I were talking about it earlier. The running backs are there's not really much out there under 50%. I mean, I thought maybe Sonny Michel would be under 50%, but he wasn't. I mean, so it's not much to go around when it comes to, I think Johnson's my number one also for the Jets, and that's saying a lot. I mean, if you need a running back this week and you're desperate, I guess Johnson would be the guy I would pick up. Maybe your league, maybe Sonny Michel is available, maybe J.K. Dawkins, but I just don't know who else you should go after who's under 50%.
You mean J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah, J.K. Dobbins.
He'd be a great
Dobbins is over 50%.
I know he is, but
he's over 50%.
Some people dropped him because of the COVID thing. Who knows what's happening with him?
Yeah, I mean, look.
If he's available, I think he has some good matchups coming up. But in some leagues, I noticed he's available. But again, Johnson's the number one guy.
I have Ty Johnson and Adrian Peterson as the only startable running backs you could pick up this week.
Well, and Benny Snell was terrible tonight, but I mean, he could get another start.
I have him ranked third. So, but then you're right, because he could get another start. So I have him third, but he might not. Then you just start moving into guys like Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison, the guys we've talked about before. I really think Pollard is a guy to own, though. I
picked him up. I stashed him. Yeah.
Ross, you have said this, that you think Zeke is going to shut it down at some point. I could totally see it. It just seems like the thing.
Especially now that Washington and the Giants both got big wins this week. That's making Dallas's road to the division looking even less likely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that in the big picture, we're talking again, as we said at the opening of the show, we're talking to people that are going to the playoffs. So hopefully, there weren't a ton of big running back injuries this last week. I'm watching this Antonio Gibson injury tonight. That's one thing that could be a concern. But outside of that, people should have their running backs pretty well set away. So you should be stashing those high upside backups. And there's one other guy to add to the list who hasn't usually been on the list because he's been over 50% rostered, but he's not anymore. And that's Philip Lindsay. And we know he can play really well when he gets a chance. So I feel like he's an appealing handcuff because he's like got a little bit of desperation flex value if you need to. But if Melvin Gordon got hurt, I think he'd be a really strong option.
Good point. So for the audience out there, weigh in. If we're missing guys, you put it in the comments.
We're not missing anybody. These are three experts.
Listen,
you know what we're doing.
I respect our audience more than you do. Maybe they know something.
But there's no one. I just really. If you're picking up a running back this week, your team's in trouble.
Well, either that or you've got some great intel, and you could only have gotten that from watching us. So I don't know. I don't know how you would have it. So let's move on to wide receivers. Wide receivers, I feel like there's some more interesting guys here. That to me was the strongest category this week. Who do you have?
I dropped this guy like 4 weeks ago. Now I want to pick him up. Is TY Hilton? He's been past 2 weeks. He's been doing great. Touchdowns. He's been targeted by Phillip Rivers a lot the past couple weeks. Also, I just feel he's going to maybe he'll have a big upswing the last 3 games. It's me just predicting stuff, but I just feel that
he's got a lot. He has the upside too.
I think he has a lot of upside. He knows what he's a veteran. He knows what to do during big games, and the Colts have to win. The Colts are a team that will probably make the playoffs, but they want to be seated in a good spot. So they're out there to win and to win games.
I know, Dan, you've talked about T.Y. Hilton before and what he's done against you, but I also feel like
that's why
he's such an
I should pick him up and keep him on my bench.
Well, he's such an inconsistent player. I just feel like this is like a trap, isn't it? I mean, he's on my list too, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like he's sucking us in. We're going to pick him up. We're going to put him into our wide receiver 3 or a flex spot or something like that. And he's going to go like one catch for 11 yards or something.
Again, if you pick him up, hopefully you don't have to start him. Hopefully you pick him up just to stash so you have some backup as a receiver. But I don't think it's a bad start.
There is one other player, I think, that really compares with T.Y. Hilton and maybe has a huge amount of upside.
Devontae Adams?
2 people ahead of him?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Devontae Adams?
Devontae Adams, I have ahead.
I have him way ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have Keke Coutee.
Yep.
I love that name. Say that again for me.
Keke Coutee. I think I have that name pronounced right. So, with Will Fuller being suspended, Coutee's time is here. He's showing up. Deshaun Watson can throw to anybody.
Yep.
And this guy's been waiting for an opportunity for a while. It's finally here, I think.
I totally agree. And, that's such a fantasy friendly situation that he's in. And one thing that I found interesting about that, I saw some stats on this, Coutee was not known as the type of player that Will Fuller is. He wasn't known as that field stretching deep down the field kind of guy. He was more of like in the past, they've used him as like a possession receiver. So I think there was some concern that he wouldn't be used that way. But if you look at the stats from last week's game, he actually was targeted down the field and he ran a lot of deep routes, which is very promising for his value because Houston, more than almost any other team in the league, their fantasy stats in the passing game come on deep passes. So you want guys that are going down the field. And I think Coutee has a chance to be a wide receiver 2 down the stretch because of that.
So now I'm curious who this other wide receiver is that you have ahead.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe it's Alan Lazard?
No, it's was Alan Lazard still under 50? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But
I think he is.
Oh, is he? I just got bored of him.
I think
I got bored.
I
Talked
think
about it
so.
too much.
This guy is so underrated. I can't believe it. Tim Patrick with the Broncos. Nobody wants to love poor Tim Patrick. But if you look at it, I actually, in my column I write for Fantasy Pros, last week I called him undervalued because he was the consensus had him like at wide receiver 52 for the week or something, and I had him in the low 30s, and he ended up being wide receiver 18. He scored 2 touchdowns.
No, he's good. The only question is, Drew Lock is his quarterback.
Well, okay, but listen to this. Drew Lock's been his quarterback most of the year, except when worse people have. So outside of this one game with Kendall Hinton, which we won't ever talk about again, these are the wide receiver finishes he's had in his last 8 games.
Go.
Wide receiver 34, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 23, wide receiver 62. So that was the one bad week. Wide receiver 35, wide receiver 34, wide receiver 19, and wide receiver 8.
So he averaged he averaged around 29, 28. That was his average in the past.
So he's always been a starting caliber wide receiver for the last 2.5 months, and he's still only 21% rostered in Yahoo leagues. I mean,
and I just go back to the tape. There's no one who talked up Tim Patrick more than I did.
That's true. You love Tim Patrick more than your kids.
Well, we need to keep talking him up. Apparently,
I need to put Tim Patrick to bed.
Yeah, and you know why I think he's been so underrated? Actually,
why?
Is because of Jerry Jeudy. No, I just think people think, oh, this is not a very good passing game, so there's only going to be one wide receiver I'm going to want on this team, and it's going to be this prized rookie Jerry Jeudy. But it hasn't been Jerry Jeudy. It's been Tim Patrick, and we need to look at what's actually happening.
And Judy's been dropping a lot of balls too. I've been
he's on my drop list. Speaking of dropping,
he drops more balls than Dr. Dan Ratner does. Anyway,
but I actually have pretty good hands.
I got another one for you guys too. By the way, someone who's really underrated for a pickup, who I think has been forgotten about, and that's Emmanuel Sanders, because Drew Brees is going to be back soon.
Next week.
That's going to be good for Emmanuel Sanders.
Let me ask you about Drew Brees real quick, Andrew and Dan. Yeah. Collapsed lung, 7 broken ribs, 7 or 8.
No, more, 12.
I don't know. Yeah. All these broken. Isn't he coming back too soon? I mean, Dan, you're a doctor. I mean, do you think
I'm a doctor who deals with pain and actually, so this is interesting.
Tell me what a collapsed lung is. Isn't that like when your lung needs a lot of time to recover?
Well, the lung, I believe, is actually kind of like squashed. So it can't expand.
Why don't they just call it a squashed lung?
I don't know.
What's the deal with that?
They should call it a squash lung.
So it should be a squash lung.
So what I'm asking is, as a professional doctor, don't you think he should just play like the last half of the season, like the last game, the last half of the season, and that's it? I mean, why are they pushing him? They won 9 in a row. Is that correct?
Yeah,
guys?
And they're 3-0 with Taysom Hill.
But they've won like 9 in a row.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, why are they rushing him out there?
Well, they may not rush him out there. I think there's a good chance Taysom Hill gets another start, especially because they're playing Philadelphia. That's a game that they should be able to win easily. So
you know what? I think just from an NFL perspective, they'd be smart to start Taysom Hill a little bit more anyway to get him more seasoned in case there is an injury, because that team can go deep in the playoffs. Brees is going to
retire too at the end of the season.
Well, and Brees is going to retire, but even
quarterback next year,
he signed a deal with NBC, Andrew.
Yeah,
but even for this year, I think they're good. It would be.
I agree. I don't think they should play Drew Brees until the last game of the year for maybe a quarter.
Well, they may not,
and rest him up. But
just
I will
rest
say
him
this,
for the playoffs.
As a pain doctor, there are guys who can come back much faster because they just have the right mindset, and maybe he's one of those guys. And so I wish him luck on that.
Okay.
And I will say about Emmanuel Sanders, even if Taysom Hill keeps playing, Taysom Hill actually looked pretty darn good for in the football
240 yards or 200 something like that. He looked good.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Thomas has been great since
he gets
Taysom Hill took
over. I read a stat, Andrew. He gets like 70% of the throws are to Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I have Michael Thomas on my team.
When Hill is quarterback, he gets 70% of the throws are to Michael Thomas, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, well, he's an inexperienced quarterback, so he's probably going to his first read a lot, and Michael Thomas is a good guy to have for your first read.
Yeah.
All right, so keep the comments coming on whether we've got the idea right. Click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and click like, please. Especially if you do like it. But if you don't, we don't want to hear from you. You just go away. All right, we're going to move on to tight ends now. Tight end is always a position where you think, oh, there's nobody good here. And then you realize it's all relative. You know, a lot of tight ends just aren't that good. There's Travis Kelce, and then Darren Waller had a huge game last week, won a lot of people.
200 yards,
the playoffs.
2 touchdowns. Unbelievable.
200 yards, 2 touchdowns. But, you know, for the most part, you got Kelce and a lot of other people below. So who do we got that's under 50% that is worth a look if you need to plug somebody in?
Well, I mean, I think
Andrew.
Anthony Firkser is interesting if Jonnu Smith remains out, and it's a knee injury. I haven't seen any indication that he's going to be back this coming week. So,
Nope.
That's a narrow target tree in Tennessee. It's A.J. Brown, who's actually banged up himself, Corey Davis, and then the tight end. So I think there could be some value there. And then another interesting guy is rookie Cole Kmet with the Bears. I didn't actually realize this, but he's played way more snaps than Jimmy Graham for 3 games in a row. So I think that they've really shifted how they're using their tight ends. And Kmet had a good game this last week. I think he was the most talented tight end in this year's class. He's a dart throw, but that's tight end for you.
But this is part of the reason you got to keep paying attention throughout the season, because teams start to shift. A team like the Bears could start to play Kmet because it's time to do that. It's time to take a look at him. He starts getting more snaps. This is where you want to look at all of those, snaps and targets. And you're making a good point there.
Yeah, because then after those two guys, it's just the usual crowd we've talked about. It's the Dalton Schultzes. And actually, Jordan Reed is still great, though. Jordan Reed
had a touchdown tonight. He looked great. We've been saying his name for a couple weeks. Yeah, I know. I love Logan Thomas. I always mention his name every time we talk about tight ends. We all love Logan Thomas
number 1.
Mm-hmm.
I have him
Logan
number
Thomas,
1.
we love.
Maybe we should.
Andrew hates him, but we love him.
Well, I love him tonight
We should
because
put
he
him on
had
the
almost
cover.
100 yards and a touchdown.
I know. And Dan and I have been ranting and raving about him for weeks, and you laugh.
He'll go back to 4 for 40 next week.
He's earned the cover of Waiver Wire. Guys, in the comments, tell us who should be on. You guys
You really
are
want to
listening
put
to
Logan
this.
Thomas on the cover?
Yeah,
of
of course
Waiver
we
Wire?
are. We are because he's a winner.
Fans say so.
Why don't we just put some
Absolutely.
sleeping pills on the cover of Waiver Wire?
All right, let's do defenses, guys.
Defense.
Who is your number 1 defense? I wasn't thrilled with the options, but there are some okay ones. Ross, who do you got?
I mean, the defense that's really picking it up, and they proved it last week, are the Giants. They played against Seattle in Seattle, and they really beat them up. I mean, physically,
I thought they're over 50% now. Are they not?
They weren't last week. What were they? Are they now over 50%?
I'll check. Talk
Okay,
about.
let's say they're not for sake. I feel their defense is moving up. I feel the team of Washington's defense is moving up. I feel that if you need a defense, I didn't really see any great buys. I mean the Raiders defense I think is really bad. The Chargers are really bad. Stay away from them.
New York, the Giants are only 15% owned. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I dropped them in one league last week because their remaining schedule looked
Playing the Seahawks
bad to me.
right.
But if they're going to do well against teams like the Seahawks, then I don't know. The Seahawks have been a little out of sorts themselves, so I don't know if the Giants get all the credit for that. But I have been impressed with that defense all season.
Really,
long.
I think every week they're just improving to me. I think they're just on the rise. I feel the team is.
I think they're coming together.
I think they're coming together. I love how Russell Wilson had a horrible week last week because I don't like Russell Wilson as a fantasy
He's
player.
had a horrible month, really.
I mean, I had a feeling he would have a downtime. That's why I wasn't really talking
It's ever
much
since
about
you
him.
talked about his body regiment. It's interesting. I think
He
it was
works
like a
out
voodoo
363 days a year.
Well, didn't you
takes
talk
2
about how much
days off,
money he's
but-
spent on it or something?
$1 million.
Yep.
But long story short, I'm sure people are mad at his fantasy numbers the past few weeks. But I mean, I think the Giants, to me, if you had to pick a curse up, I think they're the defense I would pick up this week.
I like
I
San
also think-
Francisco.
I have
They
San
gave up like
Francisco number
30
one,
something
actually.
points.
Yeah, but they're playing the Bills. I mean, the Bills are a really good offense. I mean, mostly the 49ers have looked better recently. They've gotten healthier on defense, and they're playing
The
Washington.
thing is, I think when you see a game like San Francisco versus Washington, it's a decent bet on either side. It's not going to be a terrible game in all likelihood from either
I know,
one.
but
So
it's going to be low scoring.
And
I wonder if Washington has a letdown after that huge win over Pittsburgh.
Their defense, their pass defense is the best in the league. I know that for a fact. And their run defense actually looked pretty good.
Yeah, no, they're a good defense. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I actually like both defenses in that game.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
And then you can always play the matchups. You can always go with the Dallas Cowboys against Cincinnati. Is it going to be Ryan Finley or Brandon Allen, or does it even matter? I think Allen's hurt.
In the playoffs,
bet the over in that game.
I can't trust Dallas.
Bet the over.
Oh, come on. You're going to bet on Ryan Finley? Okay.
It shows you how bad the Bengals are now. No offense, Ross, but Dallas is actually startable. I just wouldn't love to do it.
Yeah.
I think, Carolina's actually done pretty decently lately, and they're actually at home against Denver. So I think that's a pretty good option. And then Houston, they're a terrible run defense. They're a pretty good pass defense, but they're playing Chicago. I mean, I'm always happy to play against Chicago. I'm
a good one.
Waiting for Mitchell Trubisky to throw 3 picks.
I think these are good ones. Ross, anything to add before we move to kickers?
No. I mean, I told you the Giants and Washington are my 2 pickups.
All right. Well, listen, most
kickers.
Matchups come
this
down.
This
to
is Andrew's favorite thing. Talk about kickers. The one kicker I talk about every week, and I picked him up. I think Lutz is hurt, so drop Lutz and pick up somebody we mentioned in the segment. I like Jason Sanders of the Miami Dolphins.
He's like 80% on now.
Is he 80% now?
Yeah, no.
When he started, he was like 12.
Well, I told you, Ross, he was the one that broke my rule about kickers because I picked him up in one league, and then I couldn't let go of him because he was just doing so well, and his matchups were so good, like Jets and Denver. I can't cut him for those games.
No, listen, I was talking to Andrew on the phone, and he was talking about, I heard him talking to Jason Sanders, and he said, I wish I knew how to quit you.
What kickers do you guys like this week?
I have Ryan Suckup, number 1.
Suckup.
I think
you're such a suck up, Dan.
Minnesota.
Yeah, I know, you're such a suck up.
I am. I also like Mason Crosby at Detroit.
That's a good one.
I don't love him as a if he's playing in Green Bay with lots of wind and stuff like that. I wouldn't like him as much, but and I keep picking Gostkowski, even though he's a total enigma.
He's on my list this week.
They're playing at Jacksonville. I think they're going to put up a lot of points.
Yeah. So I've told you guys before, I sometimes like to pair a defense with a kicker. So I mentioned the Carolina defense. So I'd also like to take Joey Sly, the kicker for the Panthers, in that game against Denver. I think Carolina can control that game with McCaffrey back and just be in good shape there. The thing about Sly that's also really appealing is he's got one of the biggest legs in the league, so he can kick those 55-yard field goals that you're looking for those extra fantasy points.
It's not the size that matters; it's the distance.
And speaking of speaking of big legs, Greg the Leg. I told you I'll take the Dallas defense. I'll take Greg the Leg also against.
I like
Cincinnati.
Greg the Leg too. A kicker that you should drop immediately is Zane Gonzalez of Arizona. He's just dreadful. He's been missing field goals, extra points all year. I'm surprised he wasn't dropped. I'm surprised he wasn't cut today. But
I will tell you this. Horrible. People are lost at kicker because there's only about 10 that are over 50% owned. It's very spread out. Everybody's got different.
It is a guessing game. I mean, every week it's another kicker that is unbelievable. And
all right, here's our favorite part of the waiver wire, or my favorite part anyway. Who to cut? Let's go straight to it. I'm with you now, Ross. It's time to cut Lamar Jackson. 99% owned. I just don't see it anymore. I've joined you.
You join me and you start Kirk Cousins instead of Lamar Jackson. You just chalk it up as a bad experience. And I agree 1,000%.
Don't start Kirk Cousins this week. Who are they playing? I think they have a really
they're
tough
playing
matchup.
Tampa Bay.
They're playing Tampa Bay.
That is a bit of a tough matchup.
Another one I would cut. I know they won 45-0 yesterday, but Cam Newton had like 69 yards passing yesterday.
Yeah, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He was like a top 10, top 8 quarterback. It's classic.
I'm in agreement with Ross anyway.
I don't think you're going to win your league having Cam Newton as your starting quarterback. I believe I'd rather have Kirk Cousins started.
I'm going to just say the same thing I said last week about this. We're in the fantasy playoffs. If you're not hopefully you have a better quarterback than those guys. So I'm fine with cutting them.
But I would drop this week. My drop is Cam Newton. If I had to drop somebody who's over 50%.
I mean, Carson Wentz has to be number one.
I said him last week. So
yeah. And I've said all along, I was very early on Matt Ryan being a drop. I still think Matt Ryan is a fine drop.
I agree. I think he's
Jared
a drop
Goff,
at this point.
I've talked about for a while, is a fine drop. And Derek Carr is playing Indianapolis, so it was nice when he had good matchups, but that's not one.
All right, how about running backs? I'll go last. You guys will not first. Be pleased with mine because there's some
it's a lot of the guys I mentioned
names.
before: James White, Jerick McKinnon, Duke Johnson. I think you can let go of now because I told you I like to own the backup running backs for teams, but only if the team can actually run the ball, and that's the problem. Duke Johnson got a chance, and he still wasn't any good. So why hold him when David Johnson's back?
I dropped him last week when David Johnson got cleared.
Yeah, Gio Bernard.
But Bernard's my number one. I would drop Bernard. Yeah. I think the time.
I have Bernard and James White on my list. There's only one guy on my list that you guys probably won't have. It's Le'Veon Bell. I just wanted to say I believe I'm right.
I don't know why
He's getting
you don't
opportunities. Like him. It's not that I don't like him. He just hasn't produced in 4 years.
I guess you're right. I don't know if I would. I would probably stash him. I don't know if I would drop him quite yet.
I think if Clyde Edwards-Helaire will probably be back next week. And by the way, for our viewers at home, you can tell us and weigh in on how frustrated you were when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was declared active and then didn't play a single snap in the Sunday night game. I'm sure that cost a lot of people a playoff spot. Those people probably aren't watching because they're
That's right.
They're drinking heavily and crying into their beer. But
it's a great point. I think put in your comments what your CEH story is, and then keep in mind, Dr. Dan's here for you. Casey Scheinvold is a psychologist. Ross he's very far in his
I've played
training.
one on TV. I did play a doctor on TV.
And I survived the CEH thing. I survived the CEH thing, but I got burned by Tyreek Hill's touchdown catch that he caught and didn't even realize it. So that was a bad way to not get 6 points. And it was like a 60-yard pass too. So it would have been
so let's talk receivers. What receivers do we cut this week? Go ahead.
I have a similar list to what I had before. I'm going to mention the guys that are just on it before. Hollywood Brown is still on it. Darius Slayton, but there's a couple of other guys that I could see cutting. This is controversial, but CeeDee Lamb has not performed in weeks. And I just don't think there's enough to carry that offense. This wouldn't be the week I would cut him because they're playing the Bengals. I think he's playable, but I wouldn't love to play him. Another guy that I would say to cut, and this is interesting, he's actually under 50%, but I still need to make a case for cutting him because
kicking him while he's
Travis Fulghum. Travis Fulghum has been a very interesting story. He was a hot pickup, and I called him to be a hot pickup, and he was very useful. But his use is gone now because
he was great for 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks.
He's a backup now. That's the problem. Once Alshon Jeffrey came back, his snaps got cut in half.
Oh, he's been
even
invisible.
the starters in Philly are
dropped him
no
2
good.
weeks ago.
I know, but
only Dallas Goedert.
Fulgham's a good player. I don't know what the Eagles are doing. Like, why would you bring Alshon Jeffrey back and put him ahead of a guy who was playing great football?
I don't know.
Great story
I don't know,
too.
but his production's just gone, and only Dallas Goedert is really startable on the Eagles. I think.
Yeah. And so I would drop. I'm a Bengal fan, but I would drop T. Higgins too.
Yeah, it's hard to trust any of those Bengal receivers now.
Especially in the playoffs.
Boyd had that one long touchdown.
Yeah, the one
that was
long
fluky.
catch.
I mean, yeah, exactly. And then he got ejected. So I mentioned Jerry Jeudy. I think he's fine to drop now. Christian Kirk. I mean, the Cardinals' passing game is really not functioning very well right now, and Kirk isn't an ancillary part of that. So
let's talk about the Cardinals passing it. What happened to Murray the past? I mean, what is wrong?
We had a shoulder injury. We had a debate on this show about this a long time ago, and you guys might remember I said I don't think that Kyler Murray is that great a passer yet at this point in his career. He's like a lot of his fantasy value had come from running the ball. I just think having a shoulder injury on top of his limitations as a passer has really thrown that offense in a funk. Kirk is like he's the guy that when their offense is scoring 40 points, he'll get a touchdown or two.
Yeah, I would.
When they're struggling, forget
about it.
You're
right.
And then I've talked about Sami Watkins before. It's like you always think he's going to be good, and he never is.
He had a touchdown.
Did he?
I think he had a touchdown on 5 yards or something like that.
I don't know. And then, so a bit of news: the Panthers placed 2 of their wide receivers on the COVID list today, DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel.
Wow.
So Robbie Anderson gets a big value bump, but I think I would be fine dropping Samuel because I just don't really trust him enough to wait. DJ Moore I would hold on to because if he does come back in a week or two, again with COVID, we never know. But if he does come back, I think he's the kind of guy you'd put right back into your lineup. So he's worth
Andrew,
holding on
when's
to.
McCaffrey coming back?
He's coming back this week. I'm so excited.
Oh, this week. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
If you have McCaffrey, start him.
Okay,
so
I would start him.
It's playoff time, right, guys? Everybody
That's
watching
the thing.
in the playoffs. Is there any good, Andrew or Dan? Any good hints you should give for playoffs? Should I start guys that are questionable, or should I just play guys that are are healthy, or what do you guys usually do during playoffs?
Well, one tip I would give, and we're gonna wrap up on some of these tips, is if you're playing against a really good team, then play your upside guys. And if you're playing against a bad team, maybe play your safe guys. In the playoffs, it's all about whether you win this week.
Yeah.
And, along those lines, also, if you got a guy like Curtis Samuel, there's nobody to wait on. You're not waiting on anybody anymore. You're in the playoffs. Time to win.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to actually say something similar to that. But the other side of that is that you should generally start your studs. Don't get too clever and sit guys who got you here. There's a reason they got you here. And just because they had a bad game last week doesn't mean that you should suddenly lose faith in a player that's been good for you all season. I mean, even the best players have bad games. So don't get too hung up on matchup about it.
So I should start Mahomes then?
Yes. Although
you have read us correctly, Ross. Right. He did have a bad game, but yes, you should still start.
Although if Tyreek Hill had got that touchdown, it wouldn't have been a bad game.
Okay, guys.
We did another bang-up job here. This has been MFSN, the Hub's Waiver Wire. Thank you for watching. It's time to snag all those players. Ross, tell them how to subscribe.
You subscribe. You just go to the YouTube page. You ring the bell. And you can write some comments if you want. If you enjoyed the show, write the comments. If you didn't, don't write anything. And,
we don't want to hear it.
We want to hear it. But just ring that bell and subscribe. And we got some great stuff coming up. So some great interviews also. So it's going to be fun. We have Mark Cuban this week, and we also have Bob Saget this week. So it's a great week.
Yep. And basketball is coming up. Just a little plug for that. So thanks for watching, guys.
Lying with a blanket over my head, she asked if she could see who was under the blanket with me. I said, you don't want to find. It is Hideki Matsui.